All right, welcome everyone to Aesthetic Impacts information this evening. We are presenting Lyn Buchanan and Teresa Frisch, Target Selection Analysis, Describe, Don't Identify. I'd like to welcome you here and welcome Lyn. Thanks for joining us and sharing all of your knowledge and expertise.
Well, we'll see.
We'll see. I have just a few housekeeping issues. Unfortunately, this is you're technically still a webinar with your housekeeping issues, which just went away. And there we go. We do have a disclaimer that I need to read, that Aesthetic Impact does not offer information regarding medical diagnosing and treatment. If you have a medical condition or emergency, please call your physician. Many of the psychology aspects that we're speaking about in these webinars are touching on the topic of medicine, and especially alternative and mind-body medicine, but Aesthetic Impact does not recommend or endorsing specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that could be mentioned on the website as a substitute for professional medical advice. The contents of Aesthetic Impact Informational Services, such as text, graphic, image, and other material posted here, are for informational purposes only, are not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Reliance on any information contained on Aesthetic Impact Informational Services is solely at your own risk. And with that,
You've got to listen to product warnings on the TV. You're supposed to say all of that in 1/2 a second.
I'm sorry. Well, I know. I mean, they've got the commercials down to a blink of an eye here, you know. So, I know. So, Lyn Buchanan is the Executive Director of Problem Solutions Innovations, PSI, which began as a small data analysis company in the Washington, D.C. area in 1992. After Lyn's retirement from the military as one of the controlled remote viewers for the U.S. military, he held positions as their database manager, property book manager, and as one of the trainers of the unit. After retirement, he continued working for the Defense Intelligence Agency while starting PSI. Lyn also held a position as a military computer expert for the Nike Ajax, Nike Hercules guided missile systems. He holds a BA in psychology, a BA in linguistics, an MA in linguistic psychology, and has taught foreign languages in East Texas, as well as functioning as military linguist, specializing in German, Russian, and Spanish. He was stationed in Japan for 4 years, where he also gained a proficiency in Japanese and Mongolian, becoming the only Mongolian linguist in all branches of the U.S. military. After his assignment to Japan, he returned to the Defense Language Institute for another year to attend their higher-level Russian course. He became one of only 12 Russian scientific research linguists in the U.S. Army. He continues his work teaching and training control remote viewing in the civilian sector in Alamogordo. And with that, let me see if I can just switch over for a second. And is that slide up at all? Can you see my PowerPoint slide?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to turn this over to you as the presenter. And there you go. And that was too bad my PowerPoint was lost in space. But now you need to...
All of a sudden it says my thing is not sending.
Okay. You should be, you need to go down to the bottom and enable the video so everybody can see you. You have to send video. There's a little button.
Send video.
There you go.
There
Hello?
you are. Hi.
There you go.
I know that face. The voice was familiar too.
Okay, so how do I show my PowerPoint thing?
All right, you need to go up to share.
It's always something.
Share up at the top.
Share. Presentation or document?
That would be correct.
Okay.
You're quick. Maybe you should take up mine stuff.
Projects. Okay, let's see what we get here.
Alrighty, let's rock.
There you go.
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is about analysis and about analysts as well. And so what I wanted to talk about was why we need analysts and why analysis needs to be done. I think just about everybody we have here is already a remote viewer. I'm not sure about Belinda, but this was made thinking that there would be people here who are not familiar with remote viewing. So some of this is going to be pretty basic to you. And clicking doesn't work.
Up at the top, way up at the top, you should have a little counter. In my screen, if I go right up along the edge
yes.
of the right side, okay?
Okay.
And yes, we have had people here who don't know anything about remote viewing. This is their first introduction, and I've been getting emails that are very appreciative.
Okay. Okay, but still it's not working.
Okay.
How do I run my program?
All right, up at the top.
Should I put application instead of presentation?
No, you're fine.
All right.
Up at the top, I've got a little counter thingy on my side.
Yes, and I click that.
And we perceive should be an arrow to the right and the left.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Can do. Okay, basically, when a viewer goes to do a session, they view with their 7 senses. Those 7 senses are basically your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue, your skin, and your sense of ambiance. Now, on this ambiance thing, I want to have you do something. I want to have you look at a series of pictures here and feel the ambiance of what you're feeling. The sense of ambiance is one that we don't cultivate in the English language, and there are a few ambiance words in the English language. And so what I want to do is show you a series of pictures here, and on each one, see how the picture makes you feel. The sense of ambiance is a real thing, and as you show a picture, one of the values of pictures, like for magazines and all that, and for advertising, is that it is a repeatable thing. The same picture will shown to a person will create the same ambiance in people. And so here's the series of pictures. See how each one of these makes you feel the feeling that it gives you. As if you were there, how would you feel? Okay, each one of those pictures has an ambiance with it. Your sense of ambiance is your sense of your surroundings, your immediate surroundings. And the ambiance in a cathedral, you put 100 people into a large, huge Gothic cathedral, they're all going to have the same basic response. They're all going to have the same basic emotional experience. And even though there's not a body part to stick it to, the sense of ambiance is a real sense that we have that is one of our 6 senses. Now, a lot of people mistake the sense of ambiance for the psychic sense. Many times, in fact, probably most times, when you go to a palm reader or something, they're not reading your future or the mystic whatever. What they're reading is you, your responses, your reactions, sort of like a glorified poker tell. And I'm not saying that they're crooked. I'm saying that they're mistaking the sense of ambiance for the 7th sense, which is the psychic sense. And so these are our 7 senses that we as remote viewers use, because these are the 7 senses that we as humans use. Now, these are the tools that we have to work with. And these are the only tools we have to work with when it comes to both life and remote viewing. The tools we're given give us the ability to do things. However, you have to look at it the other way too, and that is that we're limited in the abilities by the tools we have. There are so many things we can see. There are millions of things we can't see. There's so many things we can hear. We can't hear a dog whistle. We can't hear things like that. And so the tools that have been given to us both give us ability and limit the abilities we have. The guy with the toilet plunger, he can fix a toilet. He can't fix a car, not with that plunger. And so there's a rule, and I'm sure if you have kids, you've taught your kids this: never use a screwdriver as a hammer. And that is the logical, conscious mind instructions that we give everybody. But the subconscious mind says, oh, why not? I mean, it does it all the time. The question is, can we use one of our senses to do the work of other senses? And the answer is yes. If you look at the limitation of our eyes, we can see only a very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Ultraviolet, X-rays, and so on are way up above what we can see. Radio waves are way below what we can see. Some people can see up into the ultraviolet, and some people can see down into the infrared, whereas other people can't. For the majority of people, though, our eyes can see the rainbow. That's the spectrum. However, the truth is that if you look at this, we're much more sensitive to the blue than we are to the green and than we are to the red. And so, in reality, what we're seeing when we look at the rainbow is more like this. We see the blue, the green, the red. Anywhere these overlap, the colors seem brighter. Anywhere they're pure, that's when we see them best. And so if you look up here at the spectrum, you'll see that there are colors that are brighter than others. That's not because the color themselves is brighter. It's because we are more sensitive to those colors. However, that sensitivity goes only so far, and then we find our limits. However, let's go into this thing of using a screwdriver as a hammer. We found in the military that by using our vision, we could see the unseen wave ranges. It was first noticed that anytime there was radioactive material, that the viewers would see sort of a green glow around any radioactive material. And we found through experimenting and, trial and error, that you can tell your subconscious mind to be sensitive to the radio waves coming off of a radio antenna. And so there would be some enemy group out in the field, out in the battlefield and all that. And a viewer would look at their antenna, and when they broadcast, you would say, oh, look, there's an orange light coming off of it, and the viewer would see it as a color. The military would look at the antenna, they know what range it is, what band or frequency band it's on, and then they would place the color spectrum over that band, and they would say, oh, orange, they must be broadcasting at this frequency, and sure enough, they would tune to that frequency, and there they would be. And so by working with your subconscious mind, you can actually move the spectrum to which you're visible, which is visible to you, anywhere up and down this whole range. You can see X-rays, you can see radiation of any kind, and you can perceive it that way. Now, that doesn't mean that you're actually seeing the radio waves. It means that your subconscious mind has been given a way to tell you what the radio waves are and the fact that they're there. And so this is sort of an associative remote viewing type thing. Okay, they're broadcasting at a certain frequency. Use the visible spectrum as our association and show me what the frequency is. And it actually works. So you can use a screwdriver as a hammer. You can actually take the things that you sense and use them to get other information that's way outside your limits. We come to a thing called synesthesia. Synesthesia happens when a sensory signal gets picked up by the wrong receptors in the brain, and all of a sudden you can see flavors, you can smell the different numbers, you can hear sizes, and so on. I know one of the most interesting sessions to me that I probably ever did was a basic target, and the target was just a picture of a lemon that was cut in half. And I wasn't actually seeing anything, but I kept hearing this beautiful chord that was just so perfectly matched. And when I went into the session getting details, I found that what I was hearing was the rind, the pulp of the lemon, and the seed, and how they so totally, perfectly harmonized with one another. And why it came out as a sound, I don't know. Synesthesia acts that way. Many people will actually see, look at a row of numbers, and they'll see them in different colors. This wasn't lost on the CRVers. We found that through proper training and sufficient practice, you know, we could cause this to happen. And when we caused it to happen, we could break out beyond the limits of what our human ability would show to us. And we could hear the unhearable. We could hear the dog whistle. We could hear ultrasound. We could hear sub-sound below 20 hertz and so on. The trouble was that then you had to have somebody able to analyze the perception and understand what it means. So just like on the radio antenna, we could say, oh, the light coming off of it is orange. Fine. That didn't tell the viewer anything. It went to a person who then analyzed the information and said, oh, that stands for this frequency. And so when you do this synesthesia thing, when you do the other things that get you to where you can view things that are unviewable, the problem is then that you're not going to analyze it as a viewer. You're just going to report what you get and move on. You have to have analysis. For that, we had to have trained analysts. And a trained analyst is a person who has worked with remote viewers, who has learned what remote viewing is like, what it does, how it works, and has as thorough a knowledge as possible of the remote viewing process, why it's done the way it is, how people can do all these tricks of the trade and all to get information that can't otherwise be gotten. There are problems. The subconscious mind doesn't talk or think the way the conscious mind does. For example, if you want to tell somebody that something is red, you'd say, it's red. But the subconscious mind, however, it might come up and say, give you a picture of an apple, and then a red ball, and then a red balloon, and then a pool of blood, and then something else. Okay, it's showing you all of these things that are red. I think all of you who are into remote and controlled remote viewing know that this is called a run of stray cats, and the slang term for it was getting the runs. And you just get this whole run of images and thoughts and everything else. And at the end of it, you have to go back and you say, what's common to these? Well, that's what the analyst does. They say, what's common to all of these? And the analyst can figure out what all that string of just random perceptions actually meant. Your subconscious may bring up some old memory, say, of the red bicycle you had when you were young. And all of a sudden you're working through a session and you get this visual and, oh, there's that red bicycle. Man, I really enjoyed that, you know, and so on. And so you write it down. And the analyst at this point has to know the viewer and has to know when they move into memories what it actually means and how to interpret what it means. It might mix up the word and give you EDR instead of RED. And this happens a lot of times. You'll get words that are spelled incorrectly. The analyst looks at these. And if you're a viewer, when you get a word that's spelled wrong, do not cross it out, okay? Your subconscious did it that way for a reason. You don't have to know what the reason is. The analyst will take care of that. It might start you humming, say, Moscow Nights. Da 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 da. And, you know, Moscow equals Russian, equals communism, equals red. And so it's going this long way around to give you information. It will provide you the information in its own way. The subconscious mind is the viewer, and it has to be in charge of the session. And so basically you're along for the ride. And so if it chooses to give you the information in some screwed up way, hey, report what it says, let the analyst figure out what it means. The poor analyst has to be able to read the words you've scribbled in a bunch of sheets of paper and figure out whether what you wrote is straight information, like is it red? You wrote red, okay? They have to figure out whether it's an analogy, a syllogism, an example, a memory, an identification, or if it's just plain garbage. And let's face it, a lot of every remote viewing session is just plain garbage. The poor analyst has to be accurate in their job because somebody's life may ultimately depend on it. And so, you know, you think that practice, practice, practice as a remote viewer is really a drudge and all that. You're not being required to do nearly as much as an analyst or a monitor or a report writer or something like that. And you're not having to go through nearly as much training as they do. They don't have to practice it as much. You have to practice. They go through more training. You learn how to talk to your mind. Okay, in order to make sense of all this, the analyst has to know the strengths and weaknesses of every viewer they work with. Now, in order to do that, there has to be some kind of a database on that viewer's work. And in order to have that, it requires having a database, period, and keeping the information in it current. Now, that's not the analyst's job. That's the database manager's job. But the analyst has to constantly look into that database, find out what your strengths and weaknesses are, and keep up with every viewer so that that analyst knows that viewer just like, well, sometimes better than their spouse does. And so the analyst has to understand how the subconscious mind works. Now, this takes education, and this takes lots of training. This takes lots of study. You have to study psychology. You have to study some psychiatry even. You have to study the thought processes, what goes on in the mind. You have to study the brain. You have to study what memories are and where they're stored and such things as that. The analyst has to be able to know when what sounds like garbage really is garbage, so they know what to throw out. As you can see, this is a tough job. It really is. Let me give you some examples here. A viewer writes in a session, "Like my shoe." Okay. The analyst, through knowing the viewer's previous work, may understand that it could mean, oh, the target is worn out. It's like my shoe in that way. Or it fits something else perfectly. Or the target is made out of leather. Or whatever, whatever, whatever. And so at this time, the analyst has to go back to the viewer and ask him or her, for more details. Go back and say, hey, what does like my shoe mean? And the viewer says, oh, you know, the target is hollow and exactly the same size you could put your foot into. Oh, now both the analyst has learned what that means for the target and has learned something else about the viewer, gets to know the viewer better. The analyst goes back, changes the viewer's summary to read what the impression meant, not what it says. And so many times the analyst has to rewrite things to get it out of remote viewing ease and put it into customer ease so that the customer can understand what's going on when they read the result. Then you have the big bugaboo, the mysterious phase 7. A phase 7 impression is one that just comes to you out of the blue, sort of just hits you upside the head. And where did that come from? It'll be to the point sometimes where you sometimes look around and you say, who's here, or who said that, or where did that come from? And one example of that is, I was doing a session one time in a room by myself, and the target was the plans and intentions of Saddam Hussein. And all of a sudden, somebody leaned over my shoulder and said, you're not going to believe what comes next. I looked around all of a sudden, and I was in the room by myself. Well, by that time, it didn't scare me because I realized that this is one of those mysterious phase 7s. So I wrote down phase 7, you're not going to believe what comes next. And I went on with the session. And that session showed that Saddam Hussein had an American missile aimed at Mecca. And during the Feast of Ramadan, he was going to lob it in there, kill all of the Arab leaders, and be the only leader left alive to lead the jihad against the non-Arab nations, mainly against the United States. At that time, what most people don't know, the projection of the U.S. intelligence forces was that if the non-Muslim world went to war with a Muslim world, the non-Muslim world had an expected life expectancy of 7 days, and we would have lost the war. I passed this session on up the chain of command, and everybody said, oh, I don't believe any Arab would do that, and any Muslim would do that, but they passed it on up. The intelligence forces actually sent somebody out, and sure enough, in a country that was neutral, they found an American missile pointed right directly at Mecca, just waiting for the Feast of Ramadan so it could be lobbed right into there. During the session one time, I was describing a location of a political hostage, and I was describing the land and trying to describe the city and the building he was in and all that, and all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, came the word raisin. oh, raisin, what does that mean? I have no idea. So I wrote it down to the side, phase 7, raisin. But in my handwriting, I spelled it wrong, and I put a space in the middle so that it came out on the paper, RAS space AIN. An analyst came back a few days later and said, hey, that was a great session. That's exactly where the hostage was. He was in the city of Ras Ein. And so I had no idea what it meant. And yet my subconscious mind had actually come out and told me, here's where the hostage is located. There was another time when I was doing a practice session, and the session got just totally ruined because I couldn't get this song out of my mind. Lucy in the sky, Lucy in the sky with, Lucy in the sky with, I couldn't think of that word. And my subconscious mind was saying, I'm going to give you this. Come on, you think of the next word. But I couldn't think of it on a conscious level. And so finally I said, look, I can't get the song out of my mind. I give up. And the viewer said, the monitor said, okay, what's the next word? He asked me what the song was, and I said, Lucy in the sky. And he said, what's the rest of that phrase? And I said, I can't remember. And he said, with diamonds. He opened the feedback folder, took out a picture, and it was 2 hands full of diamonds. That was the target. And my mind was trying to tell me this and just playing a joke on me, and because it was, a practice session. But these are examples of phase 7. There was one time when, again, I didn't know what the target was. The target was actually God, not Jesus, but God. And in this session, I found myself in the dark, in just a totally dark place with a light shining right straight down on me from above. And I couldn't get any impressions. I couldn't get anything. And in my session, I had my AI. I looked up at the light and I said, come on, give me something, give me something. And this voice came down and said, don't ask what I'll give to you. Ask what I'll give through you. And I had no idea what that meant. Finished the session up, and the monitor took out the thing, and all it said on it was God, remote view God. And so I think this was a message to me personally, where God said, hey, quit asking me for things for you. Ask for things that you can help me give to others. Anyway, every experienced viewer has stories of these phase 7 experiences, and they're always meaningful to the viewer at a very deep level. When an analyst learns to recognize these, they have to go sometimes have long, long discussions with the viewer to find out exactly what it means, exactly what it means on the deepest level of that viewer's psyche sometimes. And so many times an analyst of a remote viewing has to be an analyst. You almost have to lay down on the couch and start talking to your analyst. Okay, luckily though, there are indicators. These indicators that help an analyst understand anything that appears like weird babbling by the remote viewer. When a viewer uses a noun, it's almost always a logical guess. The viewer is trying to guess what the target is. When they're guessing what the target is, that's their conscious mind, and the monitor and the analyst know, hey, this guy has quit viewing. He's trying to figure things out now. And so they look through the session, find out where that starts and where it ends, and they say, okay, this stuff here is all stuff from the conscious mind. It's generally garbage. Let's give this less credence than anything else. When a viewer comes up with a mental picture, it's almost always a picture from their personal memory, and therefore it's important to get what that memory means to them. And when the analysts write the report, they don't use the words that the viewer wrote. They use the meaning of that memory, and you gain accuracy in that way. When a viewer reports something that seems totally unrelated, it's often very symbolic in nature. And so let's say a viewer is describing something and they say it's pink and furry and cuddly and, oh, stray cat, well, army tank. Army tank? Okay, do you have a pink, furry, cuddly army tank? I don't think so. This is one of those things that just doesn't fit. And so the monitor or the analyst has to go back to the viewer and say, at its most basic level, what does an army tank symbolize to you? And the viewer says, oh, it's dangerous. Oh, guess what we have as a target? We have something that's pink and furry and cuddly and dangerous. Okay? And so in this way, an analyst can go back and find what a viewer meant, even though the viewer was not adequately able to get across what they were trying to say. With an analyst, you have a trained person analyzing the session information and making sense of it for the customer, who doesn't often understand anything about remote viewing at all. This is one of the places where the natural psychic takes a really big swat in the butt, you know, and that is that the natural psychic will say these things that are often quite ununderstandable. And so many people just don't like working with psychics. And a remote viewer, on the other hand, who's working with a remote viewing team, what goes to the customer makes sense. And so, because of that, they will listen. You wind up with an organized information that can be read and understood by anybody. You wind up with a report that tells what the viewer actually perceived, not what he scribbled out on the paper. And I don't know how many times you've seen a scribble of a drawing, let's say. And the scribble of the drawing, guess what? After 244 days in Alamogordo, it just started raining. Oh man, you're going to be partying in the streets tonight. Anyway, you wind up with a report that tells the viewer tells the customer what was actually perceived and makes it into the report. You wind up doing some good for somebody instead of presenting them with a bunch of psychobabble. And this is one of the biggest problems with people identifying controlled remote viewing with psychic work. They expect you to present babble. And when you do, they don't listen to it. Okay? You get respect for the work you're doing, and you get asked to do some more. Without an analyst, let's take the example of a local psychic group. Let's also say that the newspaper writes a story about a missing kid. Generally, what happens is at their next meeting, they're going to bring up the story, show it to everyone, and that's target pollution, because now then everybody knows what the target is. Their fears, their imagination, their logic, and everything runs wild. And so when they're trying to do their psychic session, they have to fight all that pollution. They express their overriding concern about being able to find the child and help the child, and they get the whole group all emotionally involved. If for those of you who are remote viewers, controlled remote viewers, you know that emotions can totally wreck a session. And this is why we never tell a remote viewer anything at all about the target. They have everyone work the problem. Here you've got a statistical pollution, because some viewers are good at colors, some aren't. Okay, you take the good ones, mix their information with the bad ones, there's no telling where you're going to come out with, what you're going to come out with, because they wind up doing what's called consensus analysis and reporting. They take 10 viewers or 10 psychics, and let's say 9 of those say that the getaway car is green. 1 of them says the getaway car is red. So what do they report? They report that the getaway car is green. Okay, but if you look at the database and you find a person's strengths and weaknesses, let's say 9 of those viewers who say it's green have like 40% accuracy in colors. The one who said it's red has a 99.5% accuracy in colors. They almost always get it right. Oh, all of a sudden there's a difference, and yet when you reported it to the police, you kind of left out the red because it didn't match anything else. And this is called consensus analysis in reporting. If 5 viewers say it's right, then it must be right. Not true. Okay, then this group will either sit on the information until they learn the outcome, or they go to the police and say that they have solved the crime, and we've solved the crime. You can give your guys a holiday now, or this is what we found. You need to send your cops out right now and arrest this person or look in this place. And as a result, their information usually gets thrown in the trash. Now, police departments these days are finding that there's a growing interest in working with psychics. And so the pattern now is they're very courteous. They thank the psychics for the information. They act interested. As soon as the psychic leaves, then it goes in the trash. Okay, but they won't work with it. They won't depend on it for anything. Even worse, many of these psychic groups will decide, well, the police aren't going to do anything, and so we're just going to go out on our own and find the evidence and solve the crime. And they go out and they trample evidence. They make it so that there is no way a criminal can be prosecuted, and they just tend to ruin everything. Anytime you work for a police case, work through the police. Never work for the family. Never work alone. Okay, without an analyst, basically, you have chaos. The importance of having a well-trained and experienced analyst and providing him and her with the necessary tools and training simply cannot be adequately expressed. Having a good analyst is often more important to the remote viewing process than even having good viewers, because what the viewers get is information. We always say the viewer is like the village idiot, to whom the mayor, the doctor, the lawyer, and everybody else comes for advice, because he's going to tell it like it is. And yet, he never understands what's going on. And having a good analyst can take all of this information, put it together, and make sense out of it. The analyst has a really, really hard job. There aren't many good analysts out there. There aren't many analysts out there, period, who are trained. And of the ones that exist, only a few are what you would call world class. One of the problems that everyone has when they do work, remote viewing work, is finding an analyst. One of the biggest mistakes that remote viewing groups make, and that people who are conducting remote viewing experiments and research experiments and all that, one of the biggest mistakes they make is not using an analyst. And the analyst would make every difference in the world if they would. Okay, so what I wanted to tell you about was the importance of an analyst, give you a little bit of information about the problems an analyst goes through, and tell you a little bit of something about the remote viewing process in the meantime. And I hope that this was a good introduction to the idea of analysis of remote viewing sessions. Now, my grandfather always told me that a talk should be like a miniskirt. It should cover the essential parts, but be short enough to make people want more. Well, if you want more information, Our address is 37 Camino Ranchitos, Alamogordo. There's our phone number, our email address, and our website has a large frequently asked questions section in it, and that's going to be growing as we get more questions and publish more answers. The Seventh Sense is a book that I wrote. It's a history of my time as the Controlled Remote Viewer, Database Manager, and Trainer of the U.S. military's Controlled Remote Viewing team. There's a lot of information in it, and it's really about the only book on remote viewing that's out that gives you the exercises that are taught during a remote viewing course. Those are in the appendix of the book. So if you're interested in that, if you haven't read The Seventh Sense, I think it's a good book. I'm proud of it, and so I would recommend it to you. So if you have any questions, now's the time to ask them. There's the level of the miniskirt. Okay, now's the time to ask them, and so I'll just go ahead and leave this up on the screen. And if you have any questions, either type them into the chat group or whatever.
There are enough people, just the right amount of people for microphones this evening.
Oh, good.
So I have unmuted everyone. The only thing is, if everybody talks at once or if you're using speakers and not headsets, we'll get a lot of feedback. So if everybody would like to either text, put their hand up and I will call on them, or just very politely, you know, we'll take a turn. Go ahead if anybody has any questions.
Also, if anybody has any questions about target selection, since I was supposed to have covered that and forgot to.
You did a great job of covering analysis. When I asked that we would, or thought that we could combine those two topics, my chief concern is there are people who set up remote viewing experiments or want to conduct exercises, and you will see targets up there. You'll have like 5 things to pick from, and then see how well you score on one. You know, and
this is one of the reasons why I would like to do target selection as a separate talk. It can be a very complex thing. It's actually very simple, but when it goes to people who are not familiar with remote viewing, trying to understand it, they have these preconceived ideas that a remote viewer should be able to view anything, and that's true. A good world-class remote viewer, you can throw anything at them and they'll view it. But then they just pull people off the street, or they give them a 5-minute introduction to remote viewing and ask them to view anything. It's not going to happen. And that skews the statistics, it skews the experiment, it skews everything. And the results they get are just garbage. And yet they pour money, funding, and all that into these research projects that are just poorly run, poorly designed, and all that. I'll get off my soapbox on that one.
All right, we do have a question that's been texted in. She likes the discussion of Phase 7, and she seems to get a lot of that and didn't know what to call it. If you'd like to expand Phase 7, possibly?
Yeah, Phase 7 is, again, a complex thing. It generally happens when a viewer gets into like the intermediate course or the advanced course, and all of a sudden something will just, some stray thought will just hit them upside the head, and most people will then say, oh, well, that's crazy, and they don't even write it down. The problem with the Phase 7 is that it's almost always very highly accurate. It's straight from the subconscious mind, and it contains really good information. But because it doesn't make sense to your conscious mind, most people just disregard it, don't write it down, may not even say it, because they don't want to be embarrassed in front of the monitor or something. And so they get, you know, they miss good information by doing that. The Phase 7 like I'm not doing a session. Why is the phone ringing? And so the viewer will just ignore this, and as a result, they lose some good information. A phase 7 will almost always be a surprise. It'll almost always be something where it doesn't really seem like it fits what you're doing. And generally what causes a phase 7, we think, is that your conscious mind is starting to take over the session, and you're starting to build stories, and you're trying to figure out what the session is and what the target is and all this other stuff. And all of a sudden your subconscious mind just gets fed up with the whole process and goes blurt and gives you some information just on the level where it is so simple and so easy that you can't ignore it. Sort of like a cat meowing. Cats don't meow to each other. They only meow to humans because we're so stupid we don't understand them. And so your subconscious mind just gets fed up with everything you're doing and just goes blurt. And that's where phase 7 comes in. You should always record anything that happens like that because it's almost always good information. Oh, did that help? By the way, if you're typing stuff in, down at the bottom of the chat area, there's a send to and then a little drop-down box. If you'll drop down that box and click all participants, then everybody will see your question.
Right, everybody seems to want to send them just to me. I don't know why, but...
everybody's so shy.
Phase 7 I had in real life once. A stray dog came to wandered into our yard, and for whatever reason, he was just really nervous and going crazy, and he was a cute little beagle. So all of a sudden I like, what is your name? And I was just needed to sing to him, whatever. So I started singing Hit the Road, Jack.
Mm-hmm.
We eventually found the dog's owner, and guess what his name was?
Jack.
Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that the old ask the librarian a question and say, I'll go wait over there.
Yeah, and the problem is we ask the librarian a question, and then we either don't pay attention to it when it comes, or else the librarian will give us a piece of information, and instead of taking it for what it is, we say, wonder what he meant by that. You know, the old psychiatrist thing where one psychiatrist says hello to the other one, and the other one says, wonder what that meant. And the problem with things that just blurt out like that is we tend to ignore them or not see the importance of them. And one of the aspects of learning controlled remote viewing, at least, is that you learn to pay attention to your own self. Your own self is pretty smart. I always tell people you're smarter than you are.
I like that. Are there any more questions? By mic or text? I'm hoping to get back to my actual hands-on analysis participation here soon.
Yeah,
I vowed to myself that I was going to do these webinars, so I put my practicing aside.
Well, like I say, this major project that we're on, I'm keeping strict documentation on it, and at the end of it, I'm going to provide you a copy. We're going to get on Skype or on webinar, and we're just going to go through everything, and I'm going to show you how the analysis worked, how everything was done, how it should have been done, what it meant, what the viewer said in relation to what the viewer actually meant, and so on. And I'm going to be doing that with Teresa Fran, in order to teach her the analysis process. I hope to get time with each of the viewers to go over the same thing with them on their work alone. But with Teresa, I'm going to show her the entire project and show her the analysis process. By the way, Fran, I have been getting your messages and all that. I'm going to bring them to the IRBA conference and go over them with you. So if we can find some time at the conference, I would really appreciate it. Kristen, do you have any cases with the police solving crimes, finding people or things? Do you mean presently? Presently, we're not working on any. Have we ever had? Yeah, tons of them. But presently, we're not working on anything. I had hoped to take this month off, and I got trapped into doing this big, major project, and we have 23 viewers, and come to find out, most of them are either rusty or they're not trained in how to write summaries, they're not trained in how to get coherent information, pull the coherent information out of their session, and so I've been taking them one by one and trying to bring them up to speed, because the customer is wanting to find out which one of those or which of those he wants to hire, you know, to be a remote viewer for his company. And so when both the customer and I saw the stuff we were getting in, basically what he said was, I don't want any of these people. And I said, okay, look, let me use this opportunity to train these people and to train them up to professional status so they can produce professional work. And then once they're producing the work in a way that you can use, then you can look at the information they're getting and see which ones you want to hire. So he's allowing us a bucket load of extra time to go through some training. And I was hoping to get my book written this month and to do a bunch of other things, and this has taken up all my time, and I'm not ready to go to conference. I'm not ready for the 2 classes, and so when it comes to added police work, I'm not taking any more projects right now, and probably won't until the end of the year. So sorry, we're not doing any police projects right now.
We are now at 10:13, and does anybody else have any more questions? Do not disrespect Alexander Graham Bell. We're on being recorded.
Oh, listen, if I were the type, I would go back through time and kill him in his crib, man.
I keep telling you, don't badmouth it. We would not be able to do these teleconferences without the initial advent of the telephone.
I know, and sometimes, I just would like to see if a telephone works underwater, I'm serious. I sit down to do a session, the phone will ring and the doorbell will ring every single time. And because of that, I've gotten to where I wait until generally after 11 o'clock at night or midnight, and that's when I stay up and do my sessions, and usually get in bed at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And then, of course, get up at 6. And sometimes just the drag of having to wait until then to do a session is, robs me of my sleep.
But the universe is really quiet, and you have a great signal.
Oh, yeah. Kristen,
a couple of statements. There we go.
Just curious, how many have signed up for the MedApps course? Wish I could come. Last count, I think we had 8 and 1 called. So I think we have 1 called and said she couldn't make it. So I think we now have 7 for the medical apps course right after the IRBA conference. Then I'll be coming back home and have 1 day off, and then we'll have an intermediate course here in Alamogordo that following weekend. We just couldn't afford to stay in Las Vegas any longer to have the intermediate course there. We were going to have the intermediate course right after the conference, and nobody signed up. And so as soon as we switched it over to the medical apps course, then everybody started calling wanting the intermediate course. So anyway, 45 a.m. is good too. Yeah, it is. Getting up early in the morning is a good time around here for me to do a session. But if it's while other humans are awake and all that, they will interrupt. It never fails.
All right, we are at 10:16 p.m. Eastern Standard, and the questions are not really about your presentation this evening, although it's good information. So just asking one more time if there's anything related to analysis that anyone would like to ask.
And if not, let's go to the other questions.
I was going to say, and if not, you must be psychic.
Hey, what am I, psychic or something? Yeah.
Yeah. And these presentations will be available if you go to WebEx under My Recordings. And I'm told by the WebEx representative this evening that they will be available now, and because they have enabled the appropriate button. And once I can get caught up, I will be moving them, I hope, to Aesthetic Impact so that people can see them there. I've been given permission by Dr. Marilyn Schlitz of the Institute of Noetic Sciences that I can use their videos, their video library, to work around presentations. So I'm really looking forward to that. I have several people who have volunteered to do more. It's just I have not had enough time to get down as far as exact topics or date. But planning to, I had put magazine ads in, Spirituality and Health, Parabola, the Holistic Nursing Magazine, Transcultural Nursing, and 2 or 3 more. But
and this is cost her money too, and so she can't charge for these things. She won't charge for these things, for these webinars, but she won't let you know about it. But she could use a little bit of help on the finances and things.
Well,
and
my hope
if you would tell other people that these things exist.
My hope was that I would be able to, roll into some more ads and keep this going, which is going. And what led me into saying that little presentation there, I'm really gratified to see that we're getting people who have never heard about remote viewing in here, and they're listening and they're asking questions, and I'm getting emails. Because there are people out there whose spouses and families understand them. They have precognitive experiences all the time. They don't know that physics is studying that possibly time flows backwards, that time loops exist. So this is very helpful to them, and they're having some peace of mind because they go to bed every night with questions. And it's opening some doors for them. And I am so happy that, it's a small venture. There are only 6 people here tonight. I don't have a problem with that. If you don't, you're the expert who's spending the time teaching. But you are bringing peace of mind to people who have no idea where there's no common language. If you hit a search engine, there's no common keywords.
Right.
Until you learn the language, you don't know where to start to look.
That's right.
So anyway, I just wanted to thank you for that, because I don't publish the emails that I get, but I am getting them. So
well, good.
Very much.
Glad to hear that.
So we have not had any questions for several minutes.
Okay.
And best of luck with the courses. Thank you, Kristen and Fran. And yes, Fran, I agree. It is important work. I just met with someone today about continuing education credits, got the forms to fill out, the points of contact, so I'm going to be learning how to do that. And, it takes a few months to get all this stuff rolling. So I'm not planning on quitting anytime soon. So, but again, we haven't had any questions now for probably 10 minutes, so I think we probably should be calling it an evening.
Yeah.
And please stay tuned to Aesthetic Impact for more presentations. I have a newsletter that Lyn says he can't get to all his business, and neither can I. The newsletter is supposed to inform you of things that are coming up. Right now I'm so busy just trying to get these off the ground that I haven't had a chance to work on the newsletter. But please, you can go directly to the Aesthetic Impact Informational Services, AIIS.webex.com, to see who has signed up for the latest. My web people are trying to keep up with me as I get the emails and pass them up to them, but they refresh the sites and the links don't always work just perfectly. But you can always go to the AIIS.webex.com and see what has been scheduled and register for it. It's free. You're welcome to come, and please tell your friends. I've been putting it, enabling you to invite your friends, and that way, you know, it's the more the merrier. So, and with that, I think we are going to go ahead and call it an evening. Thank you again, Lyn.
Yeah, I'm going to go see what wet ground looks like. It's been 244 days since we had rain here.
Well, tell Linda I said hi.
I will.
Okay, I will talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks to everybody for being here.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.